Hey everybody, this is the Pentax 17, a new 35mm half-frame film camera. These are negatives from this camera, and these are darkroom prints from that camera, dry mounted on backing board. If you're watching this video, you're either wondering why you're here, or you've already heard about this little camera. Let me just tell you the short version if you've never heard about it. This is a brand new 35mm half-frame film camera released by Pentax this year. And there's a bit of controversy about it, but I love it. It's a really cool camera. The longer version is this camera is a very lightweight camera. It is made out of mostly plastic with a metal top and bottom. It doesn't have that same robustness of old cameras, but still very good build quality. The actual fit and finish is good. It has auto exposure through the lens here right at the top. There's a little thing for sensing the light. You can set your ISO. You have exposure compensation. You've got a few automatic modes, and it's got this kind of quirky zone-based focusing. It's zone focusing. Has a traditional cocking lever, and it is battery powered with a very long life battery, built-in flash. And what else can I tell you? That's about it. It's a lovely little camera. Its star attraction is that it is a vertical frame camera. So what you see through the viewfinder is actually like holding your iPhone up and taking a vertical image. Kind of the new way of doing things. And that's the main reason I wanted to try this out, because every time I see a viewfinder that has a different format, it makes me think of things differently. I can take a camera like this and I can hold it in a vertical format. But that's not the way the camera was built. You look through it, and what you see is a horizontal image. And we get our mind in that mindset. There's something freeing about having a new shape to the viewfinder that encourages you to try other things. It's inspirational. I like it. It's like when I first started shooting 6x6, the square format. That's a really neat format to shoot. Well, everything you shoot is vertical. Of course, you could do that if you want, but it's vertical. Let's see how heavy this thing really is. Put it on the scale and we get 309 grams. 309. So how heavy is that? Here's a Nikon S3 from the days of the lead rangefinder cameras, 797 grams. Here's a Canon AE1 program, one of the favorite cameras of the internet, 791 grams. And so, for comparison, here's an iPhone and a pocket knife. There you go. The camera weighs one iPhone plus one pocket knife. Let me tell you about it in detail. I want to talk to you about the camera itself and give you an overview. You've probably seen this in other videos before. I want to talk about the quality of the images that are produced, and I'll show you some of the images I shot. And I'll talk about some of the process of digitizing those images and also blowing them up in the darkroom. So let's begin. If we look up close, we'll just start with on the top, you've got the little lever you flip up, pull this guy out, and you can open the back. Harkens back to the 1970s and 1980s where you would pull the rewind lever out and the back would hinge open. But then we get back to the 1990s when we look inside, because instead of having to thread the tongue of the film into a little slot or something, you simply pull it across and rest it on a little rubber roller, and there's a little squeezy spring. You shut the camera, and then you shoot a bunch of blank frames and you're good to go. So let's move on. We look on the top and you'll see we have our ISO. And for some reason that I don't understand, the most popular ISO out there, which is 400, has been relegated to a dot between 200 and 800. So if you're going to set your ISO to 400, just dial the dial until the little line is on the dot between 200 and 800. You're good to go. And if you want to do things like pushing and pulling, you can set your ISO to whatever you want and shoot your film that way. There is no DX encoding with this camera, so what you set here is how the camera is going to meter. There's a exposure or compensation dial, which is pretty nice. It goes 2 up and 2 down. And we move over, we get to this mode dial, which looks really busy. You see all these different modes, and it's actually a lot simpler than that. There's a white section, a yellow section, and a little blue section in the middle. It goes like this. If you want to be stealthy and never have the flash go off, put it in the white section. If you want the flash to betray your presence and always come on, put it on the yellow. The yellow ones are all for flash. The white is all for no flash at all. And finally, there's a blue auto where the camera will do whatever it wants, possibly betraying your presence. With that said, there's on the white, there is a P for program. And you do have this little moon thing, which I think means if you set it on a tripod in a dark place at night or something, it'll keep the shutter open for a long, long time. Hopefully it's one of those things that actually is measuring the amount of light coming in over time, and once it hits a certain limit, shuts it, rather than something that just says, oh, I think I'm going to keep it open for 30 seconds. I don't know. See another video. Somebody will tell you about that. There's a bokeh, which is, I think, a bit pointless on a camera with a 3.5 and f3.5 max aperture. And it's a half frame, so everything's working against having good bokeh. So, it just means use the biggest aperture you can, which is not really big. And there's a bulb, and you know what that does. So, I usually will put this on the white P, meaning it's going to do program mode and no flash. Although I did try some flash, and I wanted to see how it would work as fill flash. And we have power, which has a feature that's kind of annoying, and that is the power switch is poking outward when it's off and inward when it's on, meaning you shove this into a camera bag, it's very likely you're going to turn the camera on. Small quibble. But you turn it on, and that means the camera will actually be able to do something. It's all fly-by-wire, even though it's got all these mechanical things here. The focusing, even though if you were to set the focus to one of these choices here, the lens doesn't actually move until you half press the shutter release. And likewise, even if you cock the shutter, if the camera's off, it's not going to fire. So it's one of those kind of things. Not a big deal. The cocking lever, it's amazing. I love it. It feels great. And it just feels good. We go on the side here. We've got this, you have multiple places where you can attach your wrist strap. They give you a wrist strap. Some people have complained about this being kind of cheap. Well, seriously, I want to talk about this too. The build quality and the materials. If you want a camera like this, one of these bricks, these awesome cameras made in the day of the neck brace, the day of these cameras that would give you a sore back at the end of the day. These things, this one I'm holding in my hand, would have cost several $1,000s in 1958 when the Nikon S3 was made. Likewise, over here I've got this is a Canon A1, very well built camera. And you can get these very cheaply these days. This camera was several $1,000s in today's money when it was first made. So keep that in mind when you're looking at the build quality of a little camera like this. If you had the same quality as like this Nikon, this would be a $2,000 camera, and it's not. So really happy for what Pentax did. They made a neat camera. So let's keep on moving. Over here, this little bump, some people complain about it. My big mitts of hands, I like that. It really feels good. It gives me something to grab onto. It just fits right in my hand perfect. Like others, I don't like the fact that the screw is not captive. If you loosen that screw, it'll come right out and you'll lose it. On the front of the camera, we take a look at the ring around the lens. That's where you got your zone focus. This was one of the great unknowns when I bought this thing. It was, how would that zone focus work for me? I don't know. And like the Rolly cameras, those ones you have to guess how far something is and dial in the distance. Well, this one, they give you pictures and they give you flower and mountain and 3 kinds of people. And then in a nod to the millennials and Gen Z, they have knife and fork, which is pretty cool. You dial one of these things in and that's going to set a focus range. So if I'm taking a picture of 2 people, I'll put this on 2 people and I'll be standing at pretty much the right range for that. And group of people or mountain, especially when you're outside, you just set it on mountain and take pictures without any concern for having it focus on the tree branch that's between you and what you're trying to take a picture of. This was a whole lot better than I thought it was going to be. I did find out that when you take a picture of your dinner plate with HP 5 Plus, it looks pretty sad, no color. Well, what can you do? We look on the bottom, we have the traditional little button for releasing the film so you can rewind it. And there's of course, a tripod screw mount. That's it. Nothing else on here. The sensor for the auto exposure is right there where my finger is. If I were to put a red filter on this guy for darkening the skies, the camera's auto exposure would automatically handle that. I wouldn't have to do the dealing with the extra 3 stops I would have to add of light. And that's all I'm going to show you on the camera for now. Now let's talk about the images. This is pretty neat. I really had a good time with this. And when I went out, so the camera showed up a couple of weeks ago on a Friday. I wasn't even expecting it. These things have been backward for so long. My wife said, hey, there's a box for you. I looked at it. It was from B&H. Well, from B&H. I opened it up. Oh, my Pentax 17's here. Awesome. I opened it up, put the battery in, and grabbed one of my half rolls of HP 5 Plus, and tossed it in there. And, of course, since I normally load 15 frames worth of film in my custom rolls, I was able to get 30 shots out of each roll. I went and shot 2 rolls over the next day or 2, which is a kind of a record for me. I don't shoot that many frames, but I've got about 60 that I shot. And let me show you what they look like. Here's one of those rolls. You look at that. That looks like motion picture film. Isn't that cool? And that's because in 35mm motion picture, you have 4 sprockets per frame, which is exactly what you have right here. This is exactly what a black and white motion picture would look like, except for the absence of the soundtrack on one side. I used one of my short rolls that I like to use. It's 15 frames. And so you can see I had quite a few interesting things happen. The first thing which I would consider a failure would be this section right here. And you can see there's multiple black and white frames. I believe this frame right here was probably lens cap left on. And these 2 frames, I think that what happened there was I bumped the mode switch when I was cocking the shutter. When you go to cock the shutter, Let me get turned on there. See how easy it is to hit this, especially if you got big thumbs like me, like that. This knob has absolutely no locking mechanism. It's just, it spins very easily, and so it's super easy to accidentally roll the knob over. And I guarantee what I did was I set it to something really dumb like bulb when I took those shots. So it was a learning experience, and I learned to look at that. But also, when you're out shooting, flip the lever out and leave it like that. Don't squeeze it back against the camera. Then your thumb is nowhere near this little wheel, and you don't run the risk of doing the dumb move, which I did. There you go. The other ones, this one here was the last frame. Unfortunately, it got chopped off, but this was where the film was exposed when I did my bulk loading. So you could see just there would be like a half a frame or maybe another frame after this, and then the roll of film. And I included the leader because I wanted to talk about the amount of film wasted when you follow the method that they tell you in the instructions. I watched a video from Pentax, and they showed a woman loading her camera, and she cocked it 8 times. You had to do 8 exposures from when you put the tongue directly on the spot where they tell you to until the camera was ready. And that's way too much. Seriously, this is the line where the exposed film from the tongue ends, and you could see, look at how many frames were wasted. And that's each 4 sprockets per frame, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So about 4.5 frames were wasted. That means you really don't need to do 8. Frame counter will be off, but you don't need to do 8. You can probably do 6 or 5, and you'll get whatever you expect from your film. If you have a 36 shot roll, you will have no problem getting 72 out of that. If you do like me and you have your 15 shot roll, you'll get 30 honest pictures instead of having it cut off at the end like I did. When you get to my second roll, you'll notice, well, you can't see, but I can assure you these were all perfect because of that experience. So there's a few little bits of the learning curve that we go through, and once you figured these things out, it's pretty easy. I'm pretty confident that people that shoot those Rolly 35 cameras with the focus that you have to guess the distance probably take weeks trying to really hone in on their guessing skills. Whereas this camera with its zone focus with the little pictures, it was very easy for me to get the hang of that. It took moments. Everything I took a picture of, I was able to be like, oh yeah, that's about knife and fork distance, or, oh, I'm taking a picture of a flower. So you take this, you put your thumb in the wrist strap here, and you put that right up against what you're photographing, let it drop, take the picture. It's pretty neat. The other ones are just as good. What they've done, I guarantee you, they have set it so that when let's just say, if you say group of people, it says it focuses at 10 feet, I believe. And I guarantee you that they've used the hyperfocal distance so that this is focusing 1/3 of the way into the focused area, and then 2/3 of the focused area are behind the point of focus, just like you're supposed to do. I bet you that's what they're doing here. So it's probably the focus zone, let's just say, is this wide, and the 10 feet falls here, and then objects that are closer are here, and then objects that are further up here. Again, exactly the way that we're taught to do it when we're using the hyperfocal distance. The pictures, I was happy with them. I didn't do color film like everybody else is doing. I just used my HP5 because I love it. But, well, check it out. Here's a chair. It was in a room in my house, and I looked at it and took a picture of it and blew it up, and it looked really nice. And here's some baskets made out of straw that were hanging in the hall that my wife had hanging in the hallway. And I'm a sucker for sunlight playing on a wall like this. Makes for a bit of an exposure problem, but camera had no issue with it. It was more a challenge in the darkroom, getting it so that those shadows had any detail at all. Here's a whatchamacallit in the lake at the park. Yep, it's a whatchamacallit. And this is these are some trees, and there was a little stream going through the woods, and I looked at the reflection, and again, the camera did a superb job. And here is the elusive Janilzy, the one who never shows her face in our music videos. And I used the flash to test the fill flash when I took this photograph, and I think we were sitting far enough away where I used the 2 people rather than the 1 person. 1 person is really headshot kind of distance. 2 person is the setting I chose for this distance. And fill flash, you could see that it kind of made her face really bright, and her other features are darker as the flash fell off. But it's not a big deal. Again, a little bit of dodging and burning might help that. I left it like this. And finally, this one was my favorite of them all in the park. You see, this guy was up on the hillside. I was down in a ravine, and there's a long path at the very top of this crest of this hill that went a long way, probably about 50 feet above me. And I looked up there, and there's this guy sitting at a park bench. And you could see he had the light next to him, the park light. It was just really cool. And so I took this photo, and I thought, you know what? I wish I had brought one of my other cameras and gotten this shot with a full frame camera. This is not going to blow up. I'm not going to be able to do anything. It's going to be grainy. But look at this. This is an 8x10 of that very same photo. And I can put this on my wall. I'm going to frame it, and it's going to look really good. This does not look like something from a camera that's all grainy. I had this image in my mind that these half-frame photos would look like, you know, those half-tone mask prints that Andy Warhol did with Marilyn Monroe, where you see those gigantic dots making up the image. I just had this horrible image in my mind of what a half-frame camera would look like when you blew up the frames to something decent. And 8x10, that's my definition of decent. No, I'm not going to make a poster and put it on the wall with this, but I can do this. Now let's talk about the actual mechanics of digitizing these. I use my Fujifilm X Pro 2 and a Voloy setup to do the digitizing. And you can see what I do is I have it go through this little negative holder on top of a light source, and I feed them through and snap the pictures and have the computer tethered to it. So that's my basic setup. The one thing I had to do was come up with a new negative holder for the half frame negatives that would mask off the right amount of the frame. Voloy sells a mask that you can put underneath the regular 35mm holder, but I wanted to make something that was just designed for this. And so I 3D printed this, and you can see that these pieces fit together, and it has a nice half frame, and you photograph it and go into Lightroom and use Negative Lab Pro, and everything turns out right. All the images I've been showing you here have been digitized using that process. As far as the darkroom, there were a few concerns. One of them was the negative carrier for my enlarger. And they actually sell, for some enlargers, you can find half frame negative carriers out there, but not for mine, and just as rare as hen's teeth. I wasn't gonna buy another expensive negative carrier for that. And some people talk about actually putting gaffer's tape on a 35mm negative carrier in order to mask it off. And I thought about this. I said, you know, what's the difference between projecting this frame plus all the stuff around it and using my easel to mask that off, and using the easel to crop an image. We do that all the time. And sure enough, all I had to do was put the film inside the negative carrier and center the frame I wanted, and then use the easel with the masking on the easel to block off everything I didn't want. In fact, the size of paper I was using was only going to hold one frame, and the bits of the frames on either side simply fell off to the sides and didn't do anything. I suspect somebody is going to be able to say, oh, well, you know, that probably reflected off of something and you probably didn't get the perfect contrast you would have gotten if you'd have masked it. I don't know. If I run into that problem, then I'll find some other solution. For now, I had no problem making these cool pictures with just the regular 35mm film carrier. The next issue I had was really just the fact that these are half frames. So when you use the 50mm lens in your enlarger, you'll find that you have to set the enlarger pretty darn high in order to get the frame big enough to fill whatever paper you're printing on. So I did that, and instead of having these nice pleasing 20-second exposure times, I found myself going closer to a minute. And then when I printed this, the 8x10 one, this one took 2 minutes. Gave me plenty of time for my dodging and burning that I wanted to get the grass to be lighter, so it's lightened, and the sky was almost washed out. And so I was able to get the sky and the grass looking very nicely. So that was cool, but that's a long time to be worried about maybe a truck driving by and shaking things or something like that. Not a big deal. In the end, the pictures turned out awesome. I was really happy. This camera, you don't buy this because you want to use it as your number one, your main camera. This is not intended to be used as a 35mm camera for work or for portraiture or for sports photography or for those things. This, I think the butter zone is day trips and just going out and then enjoying yourself. Maybe going to the beach with it, or you're going to a gathering with friends or something like that, a barbecue. Bring this with you. People love film cameras, and you can load it with a roll of film, 36 shots, and this will give you 72. And you don't have to worry about being frugal. You just keep shooting and keep shooting and keep shooting. And the images, they are pretty good. They are really nice. If you want to learn film photography, this is not the camera to buy. You're wasting your money. Buy one of these. This is a Canon AE1 program. You can find them in excellent condition with lens for a couple $100. And this is an amazing camera to learn on. You would be spending way too much money if you bought this for the purpose of learning film photography. With that said, if you want to have fun, go for it. The reason this camera exists is because it's fun, and I'm going to continue using it. I had a great time taking these pictures, and I'm looking forward to the next roll. That's all I got for you today. Thank you for watching.